this kind of leads me. So my larger point is, like, so I had a little bit of an epiphany about this, listening to the media, listening to everybody about this. So I'm listening to Ryan Russillo's podcast, formerly of ESPN, now for The Ringer, and he had Danny Kanell on, and he's asking him, and Danny Kanell puts out his rankings on Twitter, so just to add a little context, until Wake Forest lost, he had Wake Forest ahead of Alabama. And he had Oklahoma number 2, which is vastly different than the AP poll or the College Football Playoff Committee's rankings, And so, he's making the point that, well, being undefeated should matter and blah, blah, blah. So he asks, so he brings it up with him. All right, so how do you do this? How do you, what's your ranking the teams? And it floored me because Danny Kanell goes, well, there's a few different philosophies on how, people do this. Do you do power rankings? Do you rank all the undefeated teams, then put the one-loss teams underneath them? And I just couldn't believe that response. I'm like, what do you mean there's several philosophies on how to do this? Like, you can have whatever philosophy you want on ranking the teams, but there's no discrepancy about these are the best teams. He was like, do I put the best teams I think that will be in the playoff later, or do I put the best teams now? And it occurs to me that, okay, so this is somebody who does this for a living, right? He follows sports for a living. He talks about it for a living, and he doesn't seem to understand it. Like, he's struggling with, all right, well, how should we do this? And so he said what he used to do was he would take the 5 best teams from each conference and rank them 1 through 5, regardless of record. So I'm just going, I'm yelling at my stereo going, what? What are you talking about? So I think there is a misconception out there based on everything I've heard that what I think is happening is people don't like the system and they want to change it, but they want to use the system that we have to try to change it. So I think that's why you're getting everybody just kind of doing whatever they want. And listen, Danny Kanell can rank the teams however he wants. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not suggesting he needs to change or whatever. He can rank them however he wants. He's not on the committee.
Right.
But we can't go, well, I think this is the way it should be, and then apply those things to the committee. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was to like, for people, if people want to listen to that podcast, you should check it out, because I feel like Russillo's kind of on one side and Kanell's on the other, and I thought they did a pretty good job explaining their perspectives, even though with Kanell I tend to disagree. But I thought it was kind of interesting where Kanell, he said, he said that basically, like, he didn't agree with them ranking the 4 best teams, because he said that's just more or less, he's like, that's just too subjective, because it's like, well, one week it could be this and the next week it could be this. I feel like you should just rank the teams like who earned their way in, and but I'm just like, okay, yeah, but that's still subjective too. How do you decide who earned their way? Because like, what I thought was funny was, if you haven't watched all these games or you haven't kept up with the scores, and then you actually look at what the scores are. So I remember hearing on the radio a couple of weeks ago, Desmond Howard was on the ESPN morning show, and he was like, yeah, well, Cincinnati, they went on the road to Indiana, they beat Indiana, and they beat Notre Dame. And I'm like, and then I looked at their scores, and I'm like, wait, Indiana's not ranked, and Indiana is 2-8. Okay. And so like, oh, they went on the road and beat Indiana. Indiana's not good.
Right.
Now the win against Notre Dame's ranked number 9. They just won again last night. From what I saw, they were kicking the crap out of Virginia. So if Notre Dame wins out, then that's a really good win, but that's it. That's like all they have to hang their hat on. Okay. Because they haven't played anybody else. And even the teams that they played, they haven't blown them out. I mean, they almost lost to freaking Tulsa. So, they blew out, and then they won by 2 scores Friday night against
South Florida.
But South Florida's 2-7 or 2-8. I mean, they're
Right.
terrible. So, I guess the point I was trying to make was, I understand if he wants to do it the teams that he feels deserve to be there because of, well, Cincinnati's undefeated or whatever. I mean, I guess, but you would have to change the system. And I also just think that I don't understand people. It's like, don't you want them to rank the 4 best teams? Don't you want them to not just go, oh, well, this team's undefeated, so don't you want them to go, well, no, this team actually had some impressive wins, and because that way I feel like you could have one loss and still get in.
Right.
Don't people want that? Like, I don't understand.
Yeah. So I think people, they want to change the system. And listen, I agree the system is flawed and there are better ways to do it. I'm not disagreeing with that. You want to change the system? No problem. But the problem is, this is the system that we have. So you have to work within it. Like he said, there's no way to get the 4 best teams. Yeah, but that's what the job is. Like, the committee's job is to pick the 4 best teams. You can not like that. You can argue with that. You can say that that's not the right way to do it. That's fine. But we don't have a choice, right? I disagree with the way.
But philosophically, okay, there's no way to rank the best teams. Yeah, okay, that's fine. I mean, in the abstract, yeah, there probably isn't a way to rank the best teams. There probably isn't a way for me to decide what my favorite Metallica song is above all the others. Like, I mean, there's no way to like take some concept and go, well, this is absolutely the best, and we can, because it's a subjective. It is always going to. It's always going to be a subjective thing. And by the way, even if you just have a tournament and you decide it on the field, that's not necessary. There's other factors that come into play. You can't just totally say that because this team beat this team, that this team is clearly better. So it's always going to be a subjective thing. So I guess I sort of understand where Cannell's coming from. Like, because it's always going to be subjective, just try to take it back to whoever earned their way in, and then just let them play on the field and decide it that way. So then there's going to be less controversy, because people, for whatever reason, they feel like if you settle it on the field, that's it. Even though I kind of disagree with that.
Well, look, there's 130 teams or whatever. There's no way, there's no possible way to have an objective criteria, okay, to get this right, because there's so many teams. Like, you can't have a playoff big enough, right? The constraints of how many games you can play, how often you can play, that gets in the way of, so the committee has to do the best that they can. College football is completely imbalanced, okay? Everybody's schedule is completely different. Every conference is completely different. You have to, so my philosophy is this: you take in all the information and it's a composite of everything. It's not, everyone wants to boil it down to one thing. Well, it's this head-to-head win, or this conference championship, or, whatever it is. They want to boil it down to one thing, and that's not the way it is. And I think Colin Cowherd made a really good point where he said people don't like to leave Cincinnati out, because it's like the presidential election, right? Some people vote for the third party. They know the third party isn't going to win, okay? But they don't like the way the system is, so they're like, I'm going to vote against it. So that's what I've realized that people are doing. Like, they want the story, especially the sports media people. They want the story, and they deserve it, and all of this stuff. So I'm going to pick Cincinnati because I don't like the way this is done, so I'm just going to rail against it. Which, okay, I get now. It's like to me, I get it now. I understand what people are doing. They're not comfortable with the way this is, so like, I'm just going to go my own way. And so I disagree with, and everybody you talk to goes, well, it should be like this. That's their starting point. They all go, well, it should be,
so they're not arguing from a perspective of this is the system we have, or are they doing the best that they can within the constraints of the system that we have? They're saying, no, this whole thing's wrong. First of all, So, blah, blah. Okay, yeah, I get what you're saying. That's
Yeah.
that's a fair point. That actually makes a lot of sense. I feel like a lot of that fits with what a lot of people say.
And right. And then Joel Klatt, he works for Fox, was on Colin's show this week. And
Yeah,
he talked about the playoff, and basically his complaint was that Penn State wasn't ranked, and they should have been in the top 25, and they weren't. And I agree with him. I don't know what's going on there. That seems like a bit of an oversight. And then he's like, "Well, what would you do?" And then Joel Klatt went through. He had they had a prepared thing where he went through his 5 changes that he wanted for college football, and it's like, well, wait a minute, like that's a separate argument, like. Okay, and then he's like, there needs to be more objective criteria. Okay, like what? What objective, other than expanding the playoff, right? What objective criteria can you bring into the system?
yeah. Well, but see, I don't know how the hell you get objective criteria with this stuff. I don't think there's any way to get, like, okay, what are you going to say? Okay, unless you do, like, I mean, okay, for instance, in the NFL, in a division, right? Those aren't really objective criteria either, but they just basically say, like, whoever has the best record wins the division. What if you're tied with somebody else? Well, what's your head-to-head record against them? And then the next tiebreaker is, like, I don't know how many points you scored, or I don't remember exactly what it is, or your record within the conference or something like that, or your record within the division or something, But that's not really about deciding who the best team is. That's not trying to make some objective judgment about that. It's just basically like based on your record and these other things. So what, you're going to do it like that? I mean, or what are you going to say? Well, the head-to-head record matters the most. Okay, well, what if you have, okay, so if you have more losses than the other team, then, or what if it's like, what if Michigan State and Michigan finished the season with the same number of losses? They both finished the season with 1 loss, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're only so you're going to rank Michigan State above them. Maybe that makes sense, but there may be other times where you go, yeah, but I mean, they played this other team and their quarterback got injured, and then like they had all this weird stuff happen. Somebody blocked a field goal, like there could be all this weird, and it's like, so you're fine with that? Like, and they probably say yeah because it's like, well, it was decided on the field, So yeah, I don't understand. I don't know what objective criteria they're going to pull into. I just don't. What I'm kind of surprised by is I feel like before they even had the BCS, I feel like people would get upset because it was all like head-to-head rank, because they had polls and stuff, and it was all like head-to-head rank, head-to-head record or whatever, and someone just won, so we'll move them up, and somebody just lost, so we'll move them down. I thought that was just arbitrary and ridiculous. I like this system better because the committee's not afraid to go, well, I know this team lost to this team, a week ago, but I think that they're better. I like that. Like, I thought that there were more people who wanted that.
Yeah, so Joel Klatt wanted to bring voting back. He wanted to bring in more data to add to it, to dilute the committee's choices.
Confusing? Like, what the fuck?
Well, it's like, and this is the thing. That's why we got rid of the AP poll and the coaches poll, because of how biased they were.
Yeah.
Like we got rid of it because of that. So there's no way. So again, it's like everyone's solution is we'll change the system. Well, the committee can't change the system right now. They have to vote on what they have in front of them. So it's like, well, they've lost credibility. It's like, credibility in terms of what? Like, I just,
I don't understand what's going to happen because they lost credibility. Their team's going to stop playing games, or they're not going to.
And listen, I have news. Okay, if we go to this 12-team playoff that they're discussing, okay, where 6 teams get an automatic bid if you win your conference, right? You know what's going to happen. First of all, we're going to argue about 13 and 14 should be in instead of should be in. Then we're going to argue. So that means there's 6 at-large choices that they have to make.
Yeah, and then people are going to get upset because the SEC will get 2 or 3 teams in.
Exactly. So there is no solution like objective criteria. Like, okay, you can put some more objective criteria, but even though the conference championship thing is complete garbage, the champion of the Pac-12 is not even close to the 3rd best team in the SEC. So. Again, it's still not objective. So, but anyway, so it actually, it actually helped me out a lot to go, okay, these guys are just, some of them are voting Cincinnati because they don't like the system and they're railing against it. That's why they're doing it. And it's like, okay, now I at least get where people are coming from and why there's such a discrepancy between how some people vote the rankings and some people don't. That's why, when Cannell said that, he just goes, well, there's a few different philosophies on. What do you mean there's a few different philosophies? Like, you vote for the best teams. Like, what are you talking about? Like, it's just like, it was so confusing. I'm just like, how are you guys really having a hard time with this? Like, rank the best teams. Like, that's it. That's all there is to it.